Hi, it's Tommy Hodgins. In this video, I'm going to cover some very basic shell scripting, or what you can do with a teeny tiny shell script. Now, before I get started, a few caveats. The first is if you are questioning compatibility across operating systems, you are absolutely right to do that. The deeper into a shell script you get, or the more commands you're using, the higher the likelihood that on somebody's operating system, some command runs differently or takes arguments in a different order or something. So the longer it is, the more you should have to worry about compatibility, and the shorter it is, the less you have to worry about it. The other caveat is that it has all the same power as the command line. So with one command, you can wipe your hard drive. I think for people who are used to working with languages that have more safeguards built in, that don't let you shoot yourself in the foot, they might not be anticipating the power of the shell, but the shell is literally the exact same as what you can put into the terminal, and so it presents all the same power and all of the same lack of safety. You do need to know what you're doing, and with those in mind, I'm going to show you how you can automate things like creating files or folders, downloading or installing software, or running a series of commands to get things set up. Now, we're probably going to end up writing more code in the video here than you would probably need to do any of these things, because I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to things. So here I've got an empty folder called shell test. There's nothing in it. And so here, to show you that there's nothing in it, I ran a command called ls. So that's a very basic command. Other basic commands would be things like make directory to create a folder, or touch to create a file, or move to rename a folder or a file, or cp to copy a file. Pretty much any of these normal command line things are going to be the bread and butter of your script. So I'm going to just use the command line here and say touch setup.sh. That seems like a good thing. Usually I do build.sh if I'm running some kind of a build command, but we're going to say this is a setup. So the first line in here is going to be crunch bang, and then the name of the shell. Now, for maximum compatibility, it's not even going to be bash. I'm just going to say we're using sh. But this is where you could put bash, or like me, I'm being fancy and using fish here. So if you wanted to put whatever shell you're using here, but generally when we're writing these, you either do bash or sh. Let's just do sh for fun and see how far it goes. So any command now that I put in here that runs is just like a command in here that runs. So if I say ls, and I say ls, if I execute this script, it runs ls. If I can say echo hello, we make a new line in here and say echo hello, it echoes hello. I didn't run it. There, so it listed it, echoes hello. So you can kind of think of a shell script as the history of a session. If normally you're saying, okay, here I'm going to do command 1, and then after I do that, I'm going to do command 2, and then after I do that, command 3, you can just put command 1, command 2, command 3, and just keep going down. It's basically just a recorded shell session. So to set up a folder, here's what I'm going to do. This is sugar-free. It is a CSS preprocessor, or unbundler, or I don't know what you want to call it. If you embed Sass language inside CSS in the custom --sass-lang rule, this will compile the Sass and replace this with the compiled Sass in your CSS. So it's kind of like a way that you can embed Sass in CSS and then manage it or handle it, turn it back into CSS. So this is written as a node script. And it depends on a package from NPM. Where do we have these? Sass comes in from NPM. And also in here, there is a Git submodule. So there's two things that we'll have to initialize before we can use it. So let's automate cloning the Git repository, moving into it, downloading the stuff with NPM, doing the Git submodule stuff, creating a new folder, creating a new file, and then maybe echoing something to the command line to say like setup complete or something. So if I was going to download this, I would do git clone with this URL. So the first step, I'm going to say fetch software. Git clone, whatever, because that's what I would do right here. Cloning into sugar-free, yeah. So that does what we want. Good so far. Now the next thing I would do would be I'd cd into here and say, cd sugar-free npm install. So let's put that right here. I'm going to do that next, the submodule. So for that, I can never remember it, so I type git, and then it's in my history. So this is going to get the submodule. So at this point, we would say clone this into a new folder called sugar-free in the current directory, move into sugar-free, install npm dependencies, install or update the initialize the submodule. I don't know what the term is for that. I'm kind of new to Git submodules. And then we said we wanted to create a new folder. Now I'm going to do this outside, so I'm going to say get back out of the sugar-free folder, make a new directory called demo, move into demo, create a file called demo.js. And then we can finish it by saying setup complete. Your file is now in there. So hopefully, let me get this out of the way. Hopefully just a few short lines here. We're going to clone, grab all the stuff, get out of there, make a folder. We don't even have to do that. We can do that from that folder that we're in. It doesn't even matter. So I'm going to delete this. We'll run it and see what happens. Cloning into sugar-free, installing from npm, did the submodule thing, and then echoed setup is complete, and it's ready right here. And we can open that file in our editor and start typing our stuff. So what is it? Const sugar-free, I don't even know. I don't remember how this thing worked in terms of I export this and it takes a string. So I'm just going to do that because I like that. So that did something. Is that how that works? You gotta have the and. There. So here we have, I should probably do A, B, and C. So you can see what it's supposed to do is leave the CSS alone. Then for any Sass language that's embedded in that Sass lang at rule, it has successfully used both the submoduled CSS parser and the npm installed Sass, and it has correctly parsed this CSS and then correctly handled that Sass and output what we want. So if you are trying to create a simple script just to get things set up or installed, I can't think of a simpler way than this. I feel like in the past, people made things that were too complex. I've heard a few different rule of thumb things about this, like if you have a shell script that's over 300 lines, rewrite it in Python. I've heard other people say that that is 100 lines. This was pretty simple, and there's line breaks we don't need and comments, but I would say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is 6 lines. You could call that 7 lines of code. For something this simple, I can't imagine using something like Python or a programming language. So I think in the past people used Bash or shell scripting for things that it wasn't good at, for either unsafe things or things that really should have been done in a programming language. But I feel like people have forgotten about this. And so I feel like now I see the opposite. I see people doing things in programming languages that I'm like, man, this is literally just, it couldn't be simpler than, you want to make a directory, like that's how you do it. Or like you want to run npm install, like I can't think of a simpler way than npm install. And so I would love to bring the simplicity back for people who don't realize that it can be this easy, or that, here, anybody that's got SH should be able to run this. You're not going to have to go download Fish Shell or Zeesh or something. It should be pretty universal. Like, who doesn't have CD or Touch? So I'm not sure what the story is for Windows subsystem for Linux or whatever, but I've written this here. I would feel very confident running this on a Linux server. I'd feel very comfortable running it on pretty much any other POSIX-like thing and trusting that it's going to clone, move, npm install, git submodule. You just need these commands installed. Now, for a slightly more advanced example that's still simple, don't look at my screen. How do I do this? I work with Europeans who are very touchy about security. I blew it. Okay, I'm going to have to cover that up. Okay, so I can stop hiding. This is our build script that we use for most of our stuff. 2 of us have collaborated on this. So here we say run in sh. Here we've got a link to our wiki so we can remember what we're doing. That explains these commands. So we have 2 variables that get used in here, and the way you make a variable is you just put a term with equals and then what it equals. So variations here is a number. Sometimes we build 1 variation, sometimes it's up to, I think 6 is the most I've done. No, 8 is the most I've done. Often it's 1, 2, 3, or 4. Here it's going to get the present working directory. So like if this was in a folder named 18, then test number here is 18. So the first thing we do when we build something is we say building test, whatever the folder name is. Then for each variation, which is based on this number here, so we're basically saying, for 1 of 1, do this. And so again, we just echo, say, building variation, whatever. And the real heart of it is running this test pack command. And this is the same on multiple lines as what this would be. So it's just a way that we can format it to make it a little bit more readable. So test pack is our custom bundler, and the options that we give to it are J, so like this is the JavaScript to read. So if we're in a folder called 18.js, it's going to look for 18.js to read. The CSS would be the same. If we're in like 18, it would be 18.css. And then we're going to output to file, output dash number. So if we had 4 variations, you'd end up with, each time this loops through, you'd end up with output dash 1.js, output dash 2.js, output dash 3. And then the last thing that we pass in is a custom string that identifies both the test number and the variation. So if we're in folder 18 and outputting 4, the first time it runs, this is going to be 18-1. And then that shows up in the JavaScript somewhere. And 18-2, 18-3, 18-4. And then when all the variations have looped through, it says test built. And so that's how we think about taking the same set of files, the same JavaScript, the same CSS, and with different arguments here, based on the number of variations we're building with different build strings, and then saving it to different file names. So this is slightly more complex than this installation or setup thing, and it's using a couple extra features like variations or the do and done looping through something. But this stuff is really simple. I would not recommend trying to memorize this kind of thing. Just look it up. Look up how to safely script shell scripts, and you'll get all kinds of style guides and advice and caveats and warnings of what to do, what not to do. But ultimately, it's very simple. And so for things like creating files, running commands that you can run on the command line, or anything else, you can just think of it as an automated shell session. It's not a language like a programming language is. I know it kind of looks so similar, but I just think of it more as it is slightly nonlinear because there's a loop, but it's more just top to bottom, like what you would type into the command line to do what you got to do. And that's not how I approach writing software. Like when I write sugar-free, where is it? This is not anything at all like something I would punch into the command line. Like no part of this is what I would be writing here. But when you write a shell script, it's literally just these. So hopefully that clarifies some things and maybe gives you an idea, or maybe just introduces you to shell scripts or something. I hope it hasn't been useless, and catch you in the next video. Thanks.